Hi, we're going to build the Umbrellas MIDI hat for Raspberry Pi 4. So, here's the kit pretty much laid out. If you got the everything included kit, couple of PCBs, parts kit, QT Py, MIDI jacks. So, first thing, let's set this aside and look at the parts kit and grab what we need here. So, we've got Raspberry Pi header, we've got the header that's going to attach the top PCB, and then what we immediately need is these standoffs. Let's grab those. We've got some standoffs for the Pi, and then we've got some standoffs to go between the boards. The rest of the screws and everything we can kind of put aside for the moment. What can be helpful is to pre-assemble some of this. So what I would suggest is take the small board, and we're going to put these 5mm standoffs on it to start with. The way this is going to work is we need the 11mm, probably brass, but could be nylon depending on the kit, and that's going to go attached to each corner with one of these 5mm male-females. And just kind of snug that up with your fingers. If you're using a PCB holder or something like that, that's totally fine, but this is just going to help later on. There is a specific order that this needs to be assembled, so don't jump ahead and try to do everything all at once. Now, I may have made a mistake here, but we'll get to that in a second. I'm going to take this corner off because we're going to solder that QT Py very first. So let's take that one off. I lied to you, sorry. And we're going to put these headers aside. And then and I'm going to sneeze. We're going to have to do some editing on this, I think. So let's get the QT Py, and we're going to assemble that very first thing. So let's get that out of there. QT Py comes with some headers. You can cut those down to like this guy here. I've already got one set, so I'm just going to leave that full set aside. The QT Py has these castellated edges, and let's see if it's hard to see there. And you can solder that directly to these pads here rather than using pin headers. So that's kind of what I do, and I'm going to show you the example of this. And we're just going to use the pin headers for positioning to kind of hold it in place. So let's start over here. I'm going to maybe leave that there. You could do this before you put the spacers on, so I probably did that in the wrong order. So this is going to kind of line up, and you want the QT Py to be on the bottom, on the silkscreen side of the board, so that when it's all assembled, that USB jack is kind of mid-mounted to the board there. There's also going to be a little gap back here, and I'll explain that later on. So for this soldering, we're going to use these pin headers. I'm just going to drop them into place to sort of hold the QT Py where it needs to go. And then we're just going to solder these castellated pads in place. So the way I do this is you want to get a little bit of solder on the pad, and I'm going to start in the corner here. And you want to get maybe a little bit of solder in there, and you want to see if you can get your soldering iron to sort of touch both the edge of the castellated pad there and the bottom, the pad here on the bottom PCB. I'm going to give that a second, 2 or 3 seconds, to kind of see if it catches. It's not really doing it there yet. Let's try that again. There, we got some flow. So you can see where it's hard to tell maybe from this distance, but when the solder flows, you'll know it's kind of in position, right? So you want to look at this and see if those pads are all kind of lined up. I guess when I do that, it's not autofocusing, so I apologize. But you're going to have a nice little sort of blob of solder there on this outside edge of those castellated pads. Now, for attaching this, you only really need to attach the corner and the ground. So each of these four corners in the ground, you don't need to solder everything, especially if you're using pin headers instead, which you can, but you're going to need to kind of clip them off because they will get in the way. You don't want to have to, if you want to desolder this at some point in the future, it's so much easier if you've just done the pads we need. So in this case, I'm going to leave that in place. We just want to do the corner pads here. Another trick for this is if you kind of get the, I have a fine point tip, and you sometimes have to kind of move the tip into place here to get it to work. It's not working. So far this is like a 5 out of 10 on quality video here. With my sort of fine point soldering iron here, if I go from the side, I'm trying to get the most surface area. Trying to get the most surface area there to attach the to get the solder to sort of melt to both surfaces, and give it like a little extra if it needs it. You don't have to have it fill into the hole, but sometimes the solder will fill into the holes right there, and that's totally fine. But mostly you're just looking to see if you've got a good joint on that edge, looking at it sideways like this. All right, so now that we've got that side on, we can kind of take our little pin header away and do the opposite side. So again, we're just doing these two pins, that one, and the two corners over here. That's all we need to attach. Less soldering is just fine. You might look at it from there to make sure it's got a good kind of position, that it's flat. So I think we're okay. Another trick here is while you're soldering, you gotta press down on the cutie pie to make sure it's got good adherence there sometimes while you're doing that. And then hold it for a second until that solder solidifies. Now, this feels like I've got a little gap here. Let's try this again. All right, so let's put that spacer back on. Try to get that nice and snug. I wonder if I'm lying to you here, if I should just start over. You know what? I'm totally lying to you. Should have done that first, because I'm kind of dumb. First time? No, not really the first time. Well, I lied. Let me do some editing here, I guess. All right, back to the drawing board a little bit here. So what we actually want to do is attach this pi header, the next thing. So I've taken the standoffs off because this is way easier to do without them. So we're going to attach that, and then we're going to want to maybe prop that up with something. And it could be like, see, the standoffs are going to be like a little too tall to kind of prop that up. And they kind of work. I guess they do. Well, let's just use one of those. You could use anything to sort of just kind of prop those corners up. But let's just use a couple of these, at least to get the first one in there. It's always fun to figure out this process the first time around. Hello, there we go. All right, what I like to do for these pi headers is get it kind of flat, press down with a finger to kind of hold it in place, solder one corner, and just get it tacked in place. Then we're just going to kind of ignore those standoffs now. And with your fingers and maybe your thumb holding the header in place, I'm going to press against that and make sure it's nice and flat, and then re-solder that tacked joint you just did. And just kind of make sure that's got sort of good, nice and flat, so that's not bent at all, or make sure this is just nice and sort of attached. Same thing, now we're going to do the opposite side. What I'm actually doing now is if I press down with my iron and kind of hold that for a second, I can kind of get the whole thing flat and tack that corner in place. So we've just done one on each side. Make sure it's kind of nice and flat and straight. Looks pretty good to me. And then we're just going to do the rest of these. So here's where maybe those little standoffs will help support it a little bit so it's not wobbling around. Again, you might use a PCB vise or something to hold this as well. I don't really use those guys, so whatever. I usually do a quick one pass just to get some solder on the pins, and then I might do a little touch-up pass to make sure that things are nice and don't have dry solder joints or anything like that. So just kind of get a blob of solder on each pin, move pretty quick, a couple of seconds. Again, you're just looking for the solder to flow into around the pin and into the hole. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to do that one more time. I'm just going to touch each one of these for like 2-3 seconds. Make sure the solder gets nice, a little bit of reflow. My technique here is I kind of lift straight up a little bit to sort of make sure the solder is connected. If it looks like I need a little extra, just give it a little extra. Make sure you're not getting any bridges between the pins. You don't want to hold these for more than maybe 4 or 5 seconds, depending on your solder temperature or iron temperature. I'm at 400 degrees C, which is maybe a little hot, but I usually work pretty quick, so that works for me. Same thing, we're just doing the other side, so I like to flip it around, try to find a good angle that works to sort of not get stuck on the other components. pretty good to me. Now, we're going to get back to those spacers, I think, finally. So let's do that again. Again, the brass long ones go on the bottom, which is the silkscreen side. Sometimes those don't screw it. Let's try the other side. Again. Cool. So we've got, so basically this is going to assemble like this. This guy goes here, and we're making a little sandwich. So next step is the double header is going to go there. The trick I like for this is to just go ahead and assemble this guy on top of where it goes and attach the headers, and we're going to sort of just get that screwed together, then solder it, because we can do this part and then the bottom. So again, just sit in this place. But first thing, I lied. One more step is I'm going to use a little resistor leg, whatever you got laying around, piece of wire or whatever, to jumper. This is kind of important, actually. You want to jumper this header over here. So we've got this little 2-pin header, and that is supplying power to the LEDs over here. So I was going to put a jumper in the kits, but I think it's just easier to solder this unless you don't want the LEDs to be blinky. So the thing here is, if you're like, hey, I don't know, maybe those LEDs are going to be too bright, you don't want blinky LEDs, you can always cut that jumper. And it might be a little tricky to do once it's assembled to get something in there. So you can kind of play this by ear. You could also jumper it on the bottom. Maybe that's a better idea. Let's jumper that on the bottom. So then it's going to be a little more accessible to be accessed. So got just like resistor leg. And I'm going to bend that with my tweezers into a little U shape, and then I'm going to drop that into the slots for the header. Didn't bend it very well. So kind of tough to see there, but I've got it kind of in there. Let's solder that in place. So now, if for some reason in the future you want to make those LEDs go away, you could, you know what I'm going to do even, is, what are my other tools? I'm going to make it so that guy sticks up a little bit. You don't have to go to all this trouble. You can just jumper it, it's fine. But I've made it so there's a little loop there, and you could cut that later if you wanted to make the LEDs go away. But anyway, so that may get stuck later. I guess we could do that later on, but it's fine like that. I'm going to trim those little extra bits off. Use a piece of wire, you can do whatever you want there. You could always do this later too, I suppose, but I wanted to make sure that was done here. Okay, so we're gonna get the header back in there and get this guy going. So again, for this step, short ends are gonna go down, and then, you know, standard sort of header position with that guy sticking up. We're gonna attach the top, and you just want to sort of position it so that the pins are kind of coming through. Now, from here, we want to either, you could take all of these or one or two of them, and just screw in these 5mm guys down into the existing ones on a lower deck there. And I'll show you what that looks like. So once it's together, you've got a 5mm, 5mm, and those should be sort of snug together, right? And let's do it on both sides. And why don't we do all four of them, because this is kind of already attached at this point. These guys here on this side might be a little tricky to get if you got big fat fingers like I do. You could use a pair of pliers, just make sure you don't scratch the board when you do that. Alright, so that's attached. So now we've got that pin header in there. It's kind of held in place, but it will move around a little bit. I don't know if we can make it show up there. But what we're going to do is solder that top bit first, then the bottom part, and then it'll all be good. So let's do those headers right now. And here you can just kind of jam through them. You don't really, it's already held in position by the standoffs. So we'll probably fast forward this bit. Find a good direction here. So fine. Better angle on this. Maybe, let's try this way. Alright, so you want to give these good visual inspection. I've got a bridge right here, so let's give that a little extra. Get it? Nope. Maybe the other way. Oh, it looks like we got it. If you got a bridge like that, sometimes it's nice just to get both of the pins hot, kind of lift the soldering iron away with a little bit of a flick. Not a flick necessarily, but just enough to sort of reach it up out of the way. And then you want to give it a good visual inspection again. See if it looks nice, which I think it does. And a couple little weird spots there. All right, let's do the other side, which is now super easy. Kind of way over here in the corner. I should slide over a bit. Right, so it's kind of the bulk of it right there. We've got MIDI jacks, I think, are next. So super easy there. Those attach, don't attach on the top, they attach on the bottom where the footprint is. So look for the DIN 5, and kind of put these guys in place, and it's probably going to fall out when we flip it over, but we'll see if we can hold it with our fingers. Okay, so now you hold that all together and flip it over. We're going to do that sort of tack first and adjust position thing one more time here. So I'm going to just tack one of these pins on each of the 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sorry, 7 connections on each one of these. But let's just do one of these for each, and then we'll position them again. All right, a little bit of solder in each one so they don't fall out. Then, again, grab the board kind of sideways with your thumb, kind of hold one in place, and then resolder that connection you just did, and make sure it's just nice and flat. You want to hold it for a second or two after you release the iron so that it doesn't just fall out while the solder is still molten. And like this one doesn't look like it's in a good position, so let's give it a little push. Alright, so looks like those are kind of flat. Look like they're in a good position, so let's solder the rest. Let's clean that. Oh, this position's over there. Oops. Okay, so we're kind of assembled. That's what we got. Nice little block of stuff. This is going to attach to the Pi, and going to take a second to go grab a Pi, and I'll show you what that looks like all together. So, Pi 4B, and all you got to do is mount it by attaching the header to the other header, and give it a good look and make sure those pins kind of line up when you put it together there, or make sure the holes kind of line up, and just give it a good snap. Then your spacers here are going to kind of hold things, get things in place, and then when we attach the case, it's going to attach to all these spots. Last little thing you can do if you want to, doesn't matter quite so much, depending on how messy your flux is, you might want to clean up the little bit of flux goo on the things. You can leave it, it doesn't really matter, but do give it all of your joints a good look-see, make sure that they've got soldered float on them, there's not anything too bulbous looking or too weird looking. So I'm going to do a quick little cleanup, and then we'll do a case assembly in another video. I don't know if that's better or worse. Is it better or worse? I also have a toothbrush to give things a little quick brush. With the Q-tip, you end up with some little cotton fibers stuck to these pins occasionally, so you've got to kind of twist those off. Use a little bit of, this is isopropyl alcohol, and I've just got like an old toothbrush and giving it a little scrub. And then I'm going to use like a paper towel, or I've got these Kim wipes to sort of clean up the residual stuff here. And sometimes it's messier. I don't know if it's better or worse, but you do that a couple times, and looks a little nicer. This is all going to be inside a case anyway, so it doesn't really matter. These guys, I don't really bother too much trying to clean those up. Just maybe a quick little brush, and it's fine. Do the same thing on the bottom if you were excited about it, but you don't really need to. So, there we go. Fully assembled, umbrellas, and we'll get on to the case thing here in another video. Thanks.